This is an audio production of Hunter of the Setting Sun by N.N. Shepherd. Music by Josiah Fursanetti. Cover art by Levi Bushnell. Editing by Josiah Fursanetti and Levi Bushnell. Read by the author. Hunter of the Setting Sun. Episode 2. Eva had insisted they repaint the fence. Emmond laid a hand on the wood, brushing his fingers along the windswept grain, feeling the sturdy beam that matched hundreds of others as they looped around the corral. The thin moonlight showed it white, stark against the darkness of the world, and perhaps the rain on the wood helped add to the shine. Eva thought the white looked better than plain wood, and over the course of 2 days, Emmond and Rem, with a little help from Leo, the next oldest, had whitewashed the corral. A faint whinny sounded in the dark, and then Molly loped into view, slowing down and tossing her head as she moved to a walk in front of Emmond. The mare was black with white markings on all 4 hooves and a speckling on her hindquarters. Her tail flicked, spraying rainwater at Emmond, but he smiled despite the quick chill. "I'm back to say goodbye," he whispered. "I have to leave them, Moll. I have to go find this man. He won't rest. I have to ensure that." The mare shook her head and ruffled her lips, though no sound issued forth. He patted her cheek and ran a hand along her nose, feeling the warm air she breathed from her nostrils. Her eyes were black orbs in the dark, but they were not frightened or angry, and he welcomed the familiarity of the old horse. "Rem will want to go," he told her. "He'll cry and tell me that it's his right as much as mine." His voice lowered even more, the words catching in his throat. "But I won't let him, Molly. I can't let him." He took a breath, then another, clearing his lungs and his throat. He nodded to the old mare again and walked on, circling the corral and moving down the path toward the small house that he had helped build with his brother. Des was a carpenter in Wythe, as their father had been, and Emmond's older brother had taken over the family business. He had built several of the houses and buildings in Dara, but Emmond thought he had spent the most time and care on his own house. Emmond helped, of course, recalling the knowledge that he had gained as a boy at his father and brother's sides, but really acting more as a helper than a partner in the project. Had it been 11 years since it was finished? Had they been so young once, Emmond not yet 20 years of age and Des only just having reached into his second decade? Lamplight flickered in the windows, muted by the cloudy glass. Without taking time to gather himself, Emmond pushed through the door and stepped quickly into the kitchen, finding his sons and daughter at the table, sitting in near silence. Eva's mother was with them, holding hands and waists. Instantly, little Anna leaped from the arms of her grandmother and traded them for Emmond's, who lifted her and held her close, letting her weep on his shoulder. "Oh, son," the old woman said in a heartbroken voice as the other 3 children moved quickly to surround their father. Emmond knelt down and hugged them as best he could, wishing he had been stronger for them, wishing he didn't have to comfort them at the loss of their mother, wishing they didn't feel the need to comfort him back. Anna was 2, the youngest, and was running her fingers through his hair and whispering in his ear, "It's okay, Papa, it's okay." And though no tears came to his eyes, his soul wept. The morning hours were approaching, and once the children were put to bed, Emmond sat at the small table by the stove, a cup of tea in his hand and a barrage of advice from his mother-in-law. "How will you find him?" the old woman asked. "Supposing he is following his priestly duty and did travel to Harbin Point. You may have a chance, but what if he really did run like a coward? Emmond, you can't just leave your children." "You'll stay with them," he answered. Her hair was gray, with only a few remnants of brown, fighting against the desolation of time. She was one of the kindest people Emmond knew, moving across the land to be near her daughter and grandchildren. She helped Eva with curing and packaging and spicing the meat that he hunted. She never spoke ill of Eva and always loved their children. She was the perfect mother-in-law, and Emmond was always grateful for her. "They can't live without you," Vale said, her age breaking her words, adding a shake to them. "They can't live without you," Vale said, her age breaking her words, adding a shake to them. "I can't live without her," he answered back, with as much shaking in his own voice. "But you must, for their sake," she said, "and you must not leave." "I know," she started to add, but then quickly closed off, not continuing. Whatever words of empathy she wished to impart, she held back. Emmond had never met Eva's father. The man had died in a mine failure in the summer of her 5th year, and she only barely remembered him. Vale had not married again, but instead worked for the church in Wythe, helping mothers who were pregnant and acting as a medicine woman to those who could bear. She had been at 3 of the 4 births of Emmond's children, only missing Leo. "Did you not want to kill the man who owned your husband's mine? Did you not want to find solace in knowing that there was justice?" Her eyes were deep and welling again with tears. "It was an accident, son, but this was not. She was unfaithful." The words slapped at him like a wet hand, taking his breath away, forcing him to lean back in the chair and look away from her. Yes, that's what they said. Said that they were found together in the man's home, twisting and betraying the role of marriage, and that Horace Relevant had pulled them out onto the street and impaled them through with a spike, killing the man first and then Eva. Adultery. No one had denied it, no one had protested, and Emmond only had their word to believe. He couldn't believe it, couldn't imagine his love had turned against him. And yet, even if it were so, he found he couldn't hate her and didn't want her dead. He didn't wish to never see her again and never have the chance to see if there might have been forgiveness in his heart. That had been stripped away. There would be no chance for forgiveness for her, so there should be none for the servant, assuming she had sinned, as Relvin claimed. You know it to be true? He asked, somehow finding the words. You believe Eva could betray me so? I saw them as they lay dying. They had been in the throes, there is no doubt in my mind. He could have stripped them of their clothes, Emmond snapped. He could have fouled some trick upon them. Perhaps some evil was found about Relvin and Eva was caught in the wrong place. Vale shook her head sadly, tears brimming once more in her eyes. Not one of us is above the fall of sin, she whispered. You would strive against a servant of the potter? I would avenge my wife's murder. The look on her eyes, Emmond, as she lay in the street. Her voice trailed off. I wish it were surprise that I saw as she faded. As she faded? Emmond asked. You saw her last moments of life and you could not save her? And bring death upon myself? Emmond clenched his jaw and forced himself to not say anything more. This was a woman deeply devout, no matter her kindness and goodness to his family. There seemed to be no part of her that could believe the servant in the wrong. Rem will want to go with you. Emmond stood from the table and left without saying another word. He found he could not lay into their bed, could not feel the blankets on himself without her. The floor was cold, but it was not missing Eva, and though he did not sleep, he found some semblance of rest that did not involve reaching for a woman who was not there. Sunlight broke through the windows and pulled Emmond from his sleepless rest. His back hurt and his legs were stiff, and there was an annoying pounding in the front of his head, but he climbed to his feet and pulled on a fresh tunic and trousers, and then packed a small bag with more clothes. Vale was in the kitchen cooking something that smelled like porridge, but he didn't speak to her and went outside to the barn. Whisper stood at the door to the barn, his head down and one leg bent, the saddle still on his back, the pelt still there, tied in place. As Emmond neared, the horse lifted his head and flicked his ears, coming out of sleep. He snorted at Emmond and stepped over to the large double doors of the barn, waiting for Emmond to swing them open. Sleeping alone, all by yourself, Emmond said as he led the animal inside and began removing pelts and traps and other gear. Lonely, isn't it? Whisper gave no reply and just stood there eating grain from a bucket while Emmond cleaned and brushed him. Emmond heard Rem enter the barn before the boy spoke, but he didn't look up from the other side of the horse. I want to go with you. Go where? Emmond answered. To kill the servant. Emmond stood up fully and put his hands on Whisper's side, looking at his son. The boy stood in the barn doorway, brown hair long and unbrushed, brown tunic wrinkled from sleep, bare arms broken out in goose flesh in the morning cold. He looked like her, Emmond thought then, maybe more than he ever had before. Their eyes were the same, that was undeniable, and the brown hair with just a hint of curl to it was the same as well. And was it his nose or hers that stood on Rem's face? Emmond couldn't be sure which. Perhaps he was simply seeing her everywhere, in all things. What do you know of killing? Emmond asked. I know what needs to be done, the boy answered. Emmond shook his head and finished the last few brush strokes before tossing the tool in a bucket and patting Whisper on the rump. I'm going to find her, Emmond said. The boy frowned, not understanding. Your mother. They took her to the church, Rem said, his voice cold and hard. Too cold for a boy of 10. I know, Emmond nodded and walked past him, striding through the wet yard, past the house, and out beyond the white corral to the street. Rem followed at his heel, the boy keeping up with Emmond's quick strides. He killed Henrik Alguaine, the boy said. Hung them both there. And you saw them hung? When he didn't answer, Emmond stopped walking and looked down at his son. The boy was looking up, watching his father, his eyes red and swollen. He looked like he hadn't slept much. Nana V took us away. I don't think the others saw. Maybe Leo. She made us stay inside after it happened. You should remain inside now, Emmond said. I'm going with you. His feet tapped up and down, the toes making little splashes in the muddy street. It was a habit he had whenever he was angry or nervous. Emmond nearly started walking again, but turned sharply to his son. The white spire of the church ahead of him, his son standing in his path. Going where, Rem? You're going to bury Mother. Emmond wiped at his face and felt the roughness of his beard, the hollow of his cheeks. The boy was wise and spoke without fear, even though it was plain on his face. There wasn't sadness either, just resignation, fact and statement of fact. Speaking of burying his mother as though it were mucking the stalls or feeding the chickens. Emmond gave a single nod and pressed on, reaching the church without another word from his son. The doors were open and they entered, finding a quiet calm within that almost struck Emmond like a wall of mist, something that was felt but still thin, only touching him slightly. There was a scent as well, sweet and bitter at the same time, wafting in the air from somewhere hidden. At the front of the church, beyond the rows of benches, was a raised dais, 2 steps the length of the building leading up to the flat platform, and a small lectern stood in the middle, white and marked with a set of descending circles, with the outline of a hand in the center. The symbol of the potter, creator god of the land. He was nameless beyond the title, as far as Emmond knew. His colors were white, all white. White clay and a white potter's wheel, and the symbols were white and creation was white. Death was black. The bundles lay on either side of the lectern, white sheets covering the human lengths, and Emmond could tell, without uncovering them, which was which. Still, he knelt beside the bundle on the right and touched the face hidden in the blanket, hardly able to remove the cloth to see her. Tears found his eyes again where he thought there could be no more, and he finally managed to pull back the sheet just enough to see her eyes and nose. He couldn't bear to see the bloated lips, and especially not her chin. It was undamaged, he had seen that before, but the small cleft in it was perfect and angelic, and he missed it so much that he knew to see it again would break him even more. He heard Rem sobbing beside him, and it gave him a strange resolve. He covered her face again and lifted her carefully, hating how stiff and lifeless she felt in his arms. She was heavier, too, heavier than she used to be. And there was a smell. Up close it was pronounced, a smell that could not be hidden by the wafting fumes of the church, a smell of decay and rot, time taking over life. For a moment, as he steadied himself beneath this burden, he thought he might vomit at the smell, and the thought made his heart race in panic. Had she already become disgusting to him? Was her perfect memory so easy to fade? He swallowed hard and pushed on, carrying her in his arms like a child, pushing out of the church and into the morning sunlight. It was early, but people milled about already, as it was an early town and no one could afford to wait until midday to begin hurrying here or there. He walked with purpose back along the muddy road toward his small farm, past Master Samuel, the large blacksmith, standing outside his shop with a series of smithing tools at his sharpening wheel. They spoke not to each other, and Emmond carried on, eyes ahead, nose as closed as he could make it, breathing slow and steady through his mouth. He passed a set of 3 women in black clothes and recognized them as the sisters of the woman whose husband lay on the other side of the lectern in the church. The Olek sisters, daughters of the large land farmer, all married save the oldest, a woman whom all assumed must be beyond her years and sworn to spinsterism. They walked arm in arm, slowly and painfully, the black dresses and shawls clean and neat, their eyes downcast. What their path was, Emmond couldn't know, but they were in mourning, and that was clear enough. Briefly he wondered where their sister was, the Alguain widow, but the thought vanished as he reached the corral and walked on through the yard and past the house. He neared the edge of the woods beyond and stopped, turning to Rem, whom he acknowledged for the first time in minutes. "Go find a shovel. Bring your brothers, not Aina." Then he entered, not looking to see that his son followed his orders, carrying the stinking corpse of his wife, only thinking of reaching the place where he would bury her. Emmond had found the stone on a hunt early in the days of his marriage to Eva, before she had given him Rem, before he had killed his first bear. The woods in the back of the property bordered the foothills of the Weeping Mountains, the range stretching east and west along the north end of the valley, meeting at a point in the west where a narrow pass ran between the peaks and out along the road to Harbin Point and the great plains beyond. The land there was flat and stretched as far as could be seen. Emmond had only ever been to the border town once before and couldn't believe that there were no mountains to be seen. The forest at the foothills of the Weeping Mountains, though unnamed, teemed with deer and badger and boar, as well as brown bear and elk. There was smaller game as well, rabbits and foxes and fowl, and Emmond had trapped and hunted it all. He had found the split stone by accident, trapping through the foothills in search of fox runs. It rose up out of the clearing, the trees spread around it, giving it space as though they knew something of an ancient strength that the stone held. It rose nearly to the height of a cottonwood tree, towering up as tall as the spire of the Dara church, reaching toward the heavens. But really, it was 2 stones. The shape of each was roughly that of a long oval, rounding up to the sky and down into the earth where it stood, the space between the two thin and only widening at the top, the crack between them fairly even and straight, as though a loaf of bread had been split with a warm knife and stuck into the ground right there in the center of the meadow. It didn't match any other stones in the valley that Emmond had seen, and even the surface of the stone itself felt foreign to him. He had taken Eva there once before, and she found it enthralling. It seemed to captivate her, give her a sense of awe and wonder that he understood partially, but not in the jaw-dropping way that she did. She stared as they broke from the tree line, almost unable to move, such was the fascination. "What is it?" she had breathed, her chest rising and falling as though she was witnessing the potter himself descending from his workbench. "A stone," he had laughed, feeling a little silly. "It must have split long ago, long before man lived in this valley." "How?" she had asked. "How did it split? What caused it?" He took her hand and led her on, breaking the spell that had frozen her to the ground. It became her favorite place. When they had the chance, they would spend the evening in the meadow by the stone, watching the daylight fade over the western trees and the moon rise over the stone, the stars coming out to dance around the orb, showering the sky with pinholes of light. They made love there, more than once, and Emmond was fairly certain it was at the base of the stone that Finn, their 3rd child, was conceived. Something about the stone struck Eva, and it was the only place in all the valley that he knew to bury her. Not the Garveth cemetery at the east end of the valley, not in the old burial ground marked by cairns in the northern tiered peak, and certainly not in the ancient graveyard tucked away somewhere within the walls of the White Catherine's Monastery, up near the sky at Startop Mountain. No, at the base of the split stone where they had loved. It was the only place. The walk through the forest was long and cumbersome, and by the time Emmond reached the clearing, his back and shoulders were burning from the weight of the bundle in his arms. Either he had lost his sense of smell or had become accustomed to the scent of her death, but he no longer found it bothersome as he approached the stone, feeling the calm of the meadow and the serenity of the gray broken obelisk before him. The silence only lasted a moment as small footfalls pounded behind him, and 4 children burst through the undergrowth and into the waving grass of the meadow. "She wouldn't stay," Rem called as Emmond knelt down and laid Eva's body at the base of the stones. He turned on his knee and watched his sons jogging toward him, Rem and Leo carrying shovels that seemed made for giants in their arms, and little Aina and Finn tagging behind, the girl holding a small ragdoll that might have been a rabbit or a woman or a horse. Such was the state of it. Emmond felt sad, all of a sudden, sad that he didn't know what sort of animal the rags were supposed to be. Surely Eva could tell what it was, what it had been. As Aina neared the small thing hanging in one hand at her side, dragging in the grass at her waist, he felt a tear fall from his eye and trace down the tracks that now seemed well worn. Rem and Leo stopped before him and dropped the shovels and then proceeded to fall down in the grass and sit there, panting as though they had just carried a cow across the entire length of the valley. Aina ran to her father and stopped at his side, reaching up and putting a hand on his shoulder. It was a small gesture, but Emmond took it as the girl's attempt to comfort him. She didn't say anything, her eyes glancing back and forth between the white bundle at the base of the split stone and Emmond's worn face. He began to dig. The ground was soft from the rains and turned easily. Aina sat with her legs crossed in the grass, playing silently with the undefined doll while the boys searched the meadow and the surrounding forest for rocks. As Emmond dug, the pile of dirt and the pile of collected rocks grew, two mounds that reflected, in a flattened sort of way, the split stone that spired up to the sky, towering above them all. When the hole was deep enough, Emmond lowered the bundle inside, trying to keep his breath steady and his hands from shaking. He knelt there in the hole next to her, not able to cover her face, not even able to hold her cold and stiff hand. He could only hold the earth beside her, gripping the dirt in his fingers, his teeth grinding in his head, a pounding ache echoing louder and louder in his mind. Everything spun, the world turned on its head. Her healthy face, the way she looked on their wedding day, her bulged eyes as she hung from the entrance gate, the anger in her face as she yelled at him about his harsh words, her laugh as they held Aina for the first time, the way she stood on the tips of her toes to kiss him, her small hand in his. Somehow he managed to refill the grave and stand back at the level of the meadow. He instructed the boys to take turns with him, placing the stones in order over the turned earth, layering them across and on top of one another until they were all spent. It wasn't a cairn, nothing so high, but it was an oblong mound of rock that marked the resting place of Emmond's beloved. He tried to say something, tried to give a final word, something that his children could take on, a good memory for their mother, but he found nothing. His mouth was dry and he could hardly breathe. Aina and Finn were crying. Both Leo and Rem had been crying, but their faces were stolid, though their lips quivered and their eyes burned red. "Let's go," Emmond said hoarsely, lifting his daughter into his arms and taking Finn's hand in his, forcing himself to turn away. He led them back out of the meadow and into the forest, not looking back at the split stone and the woman that would lay forever beneath it. As he walked, his thoughts adjusted. It was like the rain, flooding a creek bed. It trickled and flowed in the usual course, moving one direction at all times. There were rocks to flow around, bends to turn, eddies to swirl through, but it was practiced, it was routine. And then a boulder was thrown in and the course was diverted. Then there was a rainstorm and the banks flooded and the stream raged and moved on. Eva's dead body had been that boulder, the hunting of Horace Relvin that flood, one at a time. He had sought the man, but had not found him, so the next course was burying his wife. That action had occurred, and his mind was slipping back to its first course, dealing with the flood. By the time they reached the clearing, the crying had stopped, and Finn even let go of Emmond's hand and ran back to the house. If Emmond admitted to himself, he hardly noticed. His mind was moving with the flood, moving into the new line, and nothing could stop him. Could anything stop a raging river? Emmond didn't think so. Emmond eased into the saddle and checked over his straps, making certain all was tight once more. Of course, he had ensured the security of all the items he was taking, but he had learned that safety could not be overlooked. Behind him sat a bedroll and sacks of food and water skins, with a satchel of clothing and a thick wool coat. Tied alongside the saddle was his long bow and quiver of hunting arrows, as well as a short bow for small game and the long bear spear. The tip of the spear was wrapped in leather and tucked inside a small head sheath Eva had made for him from a badger pelt. Whisper stepped back and forth, tossing his head lightly, anxious to ride. The gray horse enjoyed travel and adventure, possibly more than Emmond. Emmond looked at their eyes back and forth between his children, one to the other, seeing the pain and hurt and anger all mixed among them. He was almost surprised Rem was there to see him off, surprised that the boy wasn't either sulking alone in the house or secretly saddling Molly to ride after him. But he just stood there next to his grandmother, staring with tears on his cheeks, holding his sister's hand. "I will return," Emmond said, not sure if he really thought he would. If he found Relvin and died in the process, then he would not feel sorry for staying away, as long as the justice had been finished. "You don't know that," Rem shouted. He sounded so young. For a moment, his young cry bent into Emmond's heart, but he quickly steeled himself and shook his head. "I have said my word. Help your Nana, help each other. I will come back." "Papa, please," Finn and Aina said at once, weeping openly. They were long sobs with tears and snot, and he tried to burn their faces into his mind. He couldn't know how long his journey would be. "Take care of them," he told Vale, as much a command as a pleading. She shook her head, her teeth set. "This is not the way." He squared his shoulders and stared at her for a moment longer before clicking his teeth and tapping his heels. He passed through the yard and beyond the white fence and between the two small pine trees that separated their pathway and the main road of Dara Town. They were nothing more than scrubs, short little things that could have been bushes if they hadn't been trimmed, wide at the bottom and narrow points at the very top. Eva had planted them. As the house was being built, she had found the saplings in the wood and brought them out, finding the perfect place for them. "They'll mark our home," she had said to Emmond on the day they were planted. "They'll grow with our house and the farm and our children." She had grinned at this, that mix of a sheep and a wolf smile that told Emmond so many things at once. She was a danger, he always knew it, and he wouldn't have her any other way. They planted the trees while Des complained about cutting ceiling trusses by himself, and every year since, Eva tended the small green things. The first year, Emmond thought they would die, such was the deepness of the winter. Holding on to cold for so long into the spring, many young cattle died, but the trees remained. It was always the honest care that Eva gave them that kept them strong, he had thought, and as he passed by them 10 years hence, he knew they would remain strong for her. They were sentinels guarding her memory, showing a visual representation of her strength and the shared time they had spent together since their planting. Emmond leaned down and plucked a small needle of green from the tree on the left, tucked it into one of the small straps on his saddle, and rode on, away from the home they had built and toward the man who had destroyed it. This has been an audio production of Hunter of the Setting Sun by N.N. Shepherd. Music by Josiah Fursanetti. Cover art by Levi Bushnell. Editing by Josiah Fursanetti and Levi Bushnell. Read by the author. Tune in next time for another episode of Hunter of the Setting Sun.